1975 in Bell Logan's house.
Yeah, on the first one I noticed, but it took us a long time to get that October 19th.
What are you guys doing?
Jim is a
He's a
historic figure and expert, and I didn't realize that he was a leading figure in so many fascinating things. So we've been recording. It's like if you walked in a Harry Truman, you found he was just sitting there saying he was a shoe peddler in Independence, and somebody said, well, "Hey, Harry, tell him to get in prison."
Give him hell.
Yeah, give him hell. Jim, give him hell.
You okay?
I think it's working. I wish I could talk a while, and I'll see if I can get it to move.
Well,
and I'll
I
have it adjusted.
give you the name of Tony Minerich.
Yeah, where does Tony? That's
I
not the
think
name.
you'll find him if he's not in Pittsburgh. He's in Cleveland
Okay.
with the Slavonic Federation, Slav
Okay.
Lodge.
Okay. Now is Minerich spelled like it sounds just about?
Minerich.
Okay.
And I think
I'll ask Slavic people
the
around
Slavic
in
Lodge,
Fairmont.
you know,
And they'll look him up. Yeah, the local.
They'll tell you where to find him. I think he's working.
But he was in the NMU.
He was the head of the MMU.
Its chief national organizer or what?
Yes, that was after Pat Toohey and all that crowd.
What years would he have been?
He headed
Principal.
the paper 33, 34.
What was the name of the paper?
I
Remember? Okay.
Another one you can look up in Canonsburg area, Elmer Kish.
Kish.
Yeah. Hungarian.
K.I.
K-I-S-H, as I
Okay.
remember.
Young guy at that time?
In my day was.
Yeah, okay.
He'd be older now. But his whole family were
Yeah.
miners. And they could give you a lot of data. They were right there. Now, I don't know how
Was Pittsburgh the national headquarters
Oh,
of
sure.
the National Miners Union?
Sure.
And was it in a wave right out of there? Would you say like New Kensington, Washington? Those were the principal strongholds as you spread out from Pittsburgh?
New Kensington was quite a stronghold, right up to last.
Yeah.
Now, Charlie Gwynn, he come out of Ohio. He spent time in prison for his activity, but he knows the NMU crossways upside
His
down.
name is Gwynn with a G?
Yeah,
Or
I don't know what
Q.
G or Q.
where did he come? He came from Ohio, and where do you think he settled then?
He's out near San Francisco. And I'll call my brother after a bit and ask how you could get in touch.
You mean your brother might know?
Oh, my brother knows him very well, as I did.
Was your brother active in NMU with you?
I want to tell you what you left out of your whole deal in the history of the NMU. The Gallup strike, the Helper Utah strike. Now, Pat Toohey and Gwynn were very active in both those strikes. My brother was quite young those days.
Which of your two brothers?
Harry.
Okay.
He spent time in the concentration camp out of Gallup. And
Was that something like Bisbee? They rounded him up afterwards?
well, all they arrested, they threw him in a compound, you know. In fact, Spike or Harry, Spike's his nickname, he contracted tuberculosis in that concentration camp.
How much younger than you is Harry?
He was born 1950, about 9 years younger.
Yeah, he's 1 year older than I
And I think if you're going to touch on the history of the NMU,
Could you tell me when the helper strike was, say, for instance?
I can't because I wasn't here. I was in Pittsburgh at the time.
About what year?
About 34.
You mean after Lewis you're placing it after the UMW sweep?
I'll give you a little history on that.
How about Gallup, the same period?
2 strikes in that period. The NMU was quite strong in both Gallup and Helper. And at the Gallup strike was terminated, and the UMWA come in. That was on what we're talking about.
You think it was in the spring of 33 and Lewis simply took over and got recognized?
Well, this had to be later, 34, because I come back in here in the beginning of 36. The chief purpose of my coming back in, this will be interesting to you, was to make a deal with the UMWA over what they called a stolen seal. It wasn't a stolen seal, it was the old NMU crowd they tried to kick out of the local, and they...
Where?
At Gallup.
You came out west to try to settle in 36 this issue?
This gets into little politics. Bob Miner had a conference with Lewis's lieutenants in Washington, and they had made a deal. If they got this seal back, the UMWA would not oppose the release of the Gallup strikers who were in prison.
Were they actually convicted and sentenced to penitentiary terms, and you had to get them loose? Was that the problem?
Had to get them out.
How many approximately?
4.
4 were in the penitentiary.
And the only name I remember is Juan Ochoa.
Juan Ochoa. Were they all Spanish-speaking, you think? 4 they grabbed?
No, 1 or 2 of them were something else, but I can't.
Would I interrupt you if I asked him, in Gallup, it was Spanish-speaking workers in the main, predominantly?
Spanish-speaking.
How about in Helper, Utah?
Slavs.
Okay.
Slavs was a big factor. A few Slavs.
Why were these places so loyal at that point to the National Miners Union?
Well,
Had they been betrayed by the UMW?
Betrayed, and left out on the desert, you might say, at the mercy of coal company. The Gallup Coal Company was Southern Pacific.
I see.
And
they were big mines.
Yeah, well, they were so big, but they were controlled, you see.
Okay. Now, what was the seal again? Whose seal was it?
It was the first seal, or I don't know.
It was the UMW local seal that the NMU had gotten control of, huh?
At the Allison mine.
And where, with the Allison?
As I remember, the Allison mine.
In
Gallup.
In Gallup, okay.
Yeah.
And this meant a lot to the UMW to get back that original.
Well,
did they mean the charter and the seal, the whole business by the word seal?
I don't think the charter was involved, but the seal became a big thing.
A symbol to them, huh?
So anyway, Bob Miner made a deal with Lewis and them in Washington. I was given a letter to present to Hefferly, the president
of District 15 here in Denver,
Well, he wouldn't give me a letter to Gallup, but his brother was his henchman in Gallup. He said he would call him, which he did. And I went down and I met Hefferly. And
was he an organizer or a miner at that time?
Well, he between cards and whatnot, he hung around Gallup, put it that way. So he he was quite reluctant, but he come across if I would have the seal delivered he would let it be known that they were no longer opposed, these guys remaining in jail. So I had trouble with our people, but I got to see it.
When you say our people, with the leaders in prison, you had sort of an underground at Gallup, you had a contact in the mines, or were they fairly open in control of that situation?
Well, they knew who they were,
Yeah.
you see.
Was there now a UMW local in the mine?
Oh,
at
yes,
Gallup? Okay.
oh, sure.
But amongst the members, they controlled this seal, and this they wanted to get back.
Well, they accused this group of stealing it. Well, they took it out. That was a
Probably there'd been a secession, hadn't there, of the UMW local probably into NMU and brought the seal on.
It was, I'll put it this way. Those people who had had the NMU local were very reluctant to follow the directive to give up the NMU and go to UMWA. See? And in the course of doing this, they felt they were losing control. And their defense was to cop this seal. You know, without a seal in UMWA local, there's no power. The guy who has the seal has the power. See? And that...
That's interesting. It's a fascinating little tidbit of history.
Yeah.
And you negotiated then, you convinced them to give up the seal.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story. To get this seal, I went out with them at midnight, some Arroyo, I can't remember where it was.
Outside of Gallup, huh?
Yeah, and they dug up the seal.
They knew where they'd buried it, huh?
Oh, sure.
Were they still Mexican-American, the group in leadership, or were they mixed with Slav and Americans?
Slavs, Spanish-speaking.
Yeah.
And, I think there were Greek or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
This
I'm
was to
gonna
get
add-
their comrades out of jail is what it amounted to.
yeah, well, I had a time convincing them.
They thought they'd be double-crossed, I guess, by him.
The end result was good. They were turned out of jail.
That both sides kept their commitment.
Yeah.
In other words, you delivered the seal, and they spread the word to release him
Ochoa
from jail.
is out in California,
Is he?
and
He's alive, as far as you
I
know.
might give you his name if you.
Yes.
You'll find him very intelligent.
Ochoa, huh?
Yeah, I've got his address at home.
Yeah, I'd like to have.
I forgot about that.
When did you last talk with him? Or so?
About 3 years.
You've stayed in touch, haven't you, over these
Well,
years?
he came to Denver. He has a son here. And,
Mhm. How
uh,
about Helper? Did you ever have anything to do with Helper?
I did, but not in that strike period. Harry could give you a rundown of who
But was Harry at Gallup or at Helper during?
he was in both places.
both places.
My
He
bro-
was pretty active in the thing.
My brother Dick was in Helper.
Mhm.
See? Well, I think that winds that part up. I wanted to give you this name if you would carry a column on press. Bob Mitchell, the editor of the Walsenburg Independent.
Yes. At that time or now?
This goes back to 1913
All right.
strike. He was murdered in the house next door to my aunt. You talked
Dick's
about
wife, huh?
my Uncle Dick's.
Your Uncle Dick's wife.
Yeah. You talked about Jeff Farr.
Yeah.
Well, this, Bob Mitchell was a backer of Neely, the Democratic candidate for sheriff.
Mhm.
And he had aroused more than the hatred, enmity of Farr. Well, this thing went on, it must have been about 1915. He was murdered in his own house, see. And if you want to look that up,
It'll show in the newspaper just as a
well,
death, or
I
did the paper
don't
report
know
it?
what the,
You think the company gun thugs got him,
it was Farr's henchmen.
the deputies
Yeah,
themselves?
no one knew. We were sitting outside, and whoever did it, we didn't see him get out of the house.
You heard a shot, or you didn't?
Well, the noise we didn't pay any attention to.
Mhm.
Happened about 5 o'clock in the evening. But when we knew what happened, and well, the coroner and the sheriff and everything. As kids, we were told to get the hell out of there, you know. But I think that...
Okay, I thank you for catching me up. I had some second thoughts since we talked. And let me find the sheet of paper I put them on.
It's all Greek to you, Al?
He knows Walsenburg in house.
Sure as hell did. I represented a newspaper there for 15 years, but long after what you're talking.
If you don't mind, let me throw a few things at you that I feel we strayed off on yesterday. You said that when you moved from being just a working miner and took part in the motorcade down into Florence and Canyon City, that you then became a leader. You, for the first time, soapboxed, as you put it.
I became...
And one of the people, or some of the people, said to you, you were a good mule skinner, you were very popular, and you were a heavy drinker.
Good whiskey.
Good whiskey man, that you had to do something about that. And I think you told me that you were so devoted to getting active in the labor movement, you gave up drinking at that point. Was that right? Or heavy drinking?
If that was the issue between me and my fellow miners, I gave up the drinking.
All right. Then you priced, you were going to give me, I'd like some insights into what it cost to throw a pretty good drunk, because this is prohibition times.
Well, payday, 7 pints for $10 or $10 a gallon.
Now, who was this moonshine made right in the camp?
Well,
Or was it brought in by some of the guys who bootlegged?
Bootleggers lived around
Right.
the fringes.
Some of the miners actually bootlegged, didn't they, during the 20s?
Yeah.
It was common in Appalachia, I know.
Well,
Some of them used to laugh between, some of them went to jail for,
I tell you, before I worked
strikes,
in the
and some for moonshine.
I worked in the mine. I run a grocery route up through the coal camps. And payday, coming back, I'd stop in, they'd pay their bill, and I had a drink. But every payday, that bottle was on the table. Come from local bootleggers.
Now, this was like a bar in a house, or was this just personal?
This is the family.
Just family?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
But there also were probably houses that sort of ran like small bars for others.
Yeah, they kept a tight lid on them, though.
No strangers could.
You
mean the sheriff would be on top
sure.
of that fast? Okay.
Some of them could be bought off.
Okay.
Others couldn't.
I'll tell you something I'd like you to tell, and Al will appreciate it, because what happened is the tape ran out yesterday.
Okay.
When you got the job in 1929, you had already gone somewhere east, but you came back to Vulcan Mine. And you began telling this story about a bad mule, and I wish you'd repeat it, because we didn't get it on the tape.
Well, that's an episode. That's my last day in the mines. I decided coal mining wasn't for me. I don't know how far did we get in this story?
Well, it started at getting hired. You remember? You had trouble because you were known as a strong union man getting in. You told the guy that helped you. You told the whole thing. Why don't you start it from there?
Well, I'd
Who he
been
was.
active leader in the strike. I'd been in jail for the activity. And when the UMWA signed up with the Rocky Mountain Fuel, of course, to go to work, I had to sign the slip to give my loyalty to the UMWA. Slightly humiliating, but I did it. I needed a job so damn bad I had to go to work. And so getting a job was a problem. I'd gotten a job.
How did you get on? You couldn't have got on unless
Well,
you knew a superintendent or something.
Well, I want to tell you what preceded that. At the Morrison, and I think it was the mule boss who, you know, he's looking for mule skinners. He hired me. But when I went to go down the shaft, I was turned away. I wasn't allowed to go down. That was part of the blacklist. Well, I knew this.
And that, the Morrison at that point was a union mine?
UMWA.
But you were a wobbly in their eyes, so you were turned away.
Well, I don't know whether it was the company or the men.
Okay.
But I know from the day I was hired, the day I went to work, they decided I wasn't going to work.
Where was the Morrison, by the way? Where was it located at?
Near Erie. That was the Weld County operation. In fact, the same company operated that Washington. You had the
Mine that we talked about
Yeah.
a while ago. Okay.
I knew the pit boss at the Vulcan, and you know, he was looking for good mule skinners, drivers. He says, you come down and I'll get you by Harry Unwin, who was the superintendent. And he did. He kept his word. But the part of the bargain that I had been told was when I went to work there, I was given a mule that they had considered unruly and would have to take it out. They'd brought it in during the period of the strike, and scab mule skinners hadn't been able to cope with it. So I took it. He turned out to be a hell of a good mule, as you would want for underground. I think I told you a little episode of this hill and the breaking the track at the bottom, and one day went by and it wasn't fixed. Second day went by, it wasn't fixed. Well, anyways, it's getting on my nerves. So this time I had a spill, and Harry Unwin, the super, come by, and he got a little profane and, you know, insinuating, making demands and whatnot. Well, anyway, it got kind of rough, and I picked up a sprag and went after him. And he took off. Well, I could have went to jail for that, because you don't hit a man underground by state law. It's been done.
You went after him, but you actually didn't
No,
strike a blow. Yeah.
No, if I'd hit him with sprag,
would have been done in, yeah.
He would have known it. Well, I got by that spring. In the summer, the mines up there.
Well, when was it the bunch of cars got away? Was that the time
Well,
you turned
that's
them
when I
loose?
went back in the fall.
Oh, all right, go ahead. I just thought it might have happened.
And that spring had been quite, it wasn't miserable for me, but these places they were working, the old pillars they were pulling, they were bad. I remember when I'd go in there to pull a car, you didn't know whether you're coming out with that car or not. The roof was creaking, and they'd put a lot of the old, or the fellows that been loyal through the strikers in those places. And they were like I was. They had to work. They had families. But we got through. Well, when I went back in the fall, I expected to get the same mule, you know. I didn't get the mule because he'd been broke. So the one particular scab driver, I didn't hate him, but I didn't like him. He got the mule, and I got what they called Old Deefy. But no old mule, he was deep. And they put me up on a hill to pull coal. So, coming off this hill was a Bradus in the middle of the entry. So old Deefy, when he hit this, not knowing what was on the other side, he turned sideways. And of course you're caught between the car and Deefy, so you ride it through, push him through the Bradus. Well, I got tired of that, so I started putting Deefy in the crosscut, and I'd let these cars roll and put in.
You were up on a hill, so you let them
Yeah,
go down.
and I'd throw in a couple of sprags, and Deefy and I'd follow down and pick them up and pull them into the party. Well, this one night the cars got rolling a little faster. Then maybe I didn't get all the sprags in. They turned upside down or over on their side and tore out some track. Well,
How many cars were you usually pulling?
2 to 3. I put them back on the track and pulled them out, took Deefy to the barn, and that's the last damn
You
ship.
kept walking.
Yeah, shipped in the mine.
Old Deefy, huh? What particularly would be the problem underground with a deaf mule? What?
Well, you can't take a man. You can't
Right,
hear.
he can't say gee,
No,
you can't get him to.
None of those things meant
No
that.
signals.
No.
And tugging at reins, was
Well,
he more sensitive to that or not?
That was the only way you could.
But you couldn't geo
Mules,
him. And,
you've got to, if you're putting in time with them, they're a very intelligent animal. They know what they can get away with, what's expected of them, and what they're prepared to give. The mules should have been taken out to pasture in a long time.
how old do you figure Old Deefy was?
I wouldn't know. He'd been in that mine for years.
Why were the Rocky Mountain Fuel Company mines generally without motors, or were they using
Well,
a mixed situation, or what?
We had motors. Vulcan didn't have. They had an old hoist that pulled the coal from the
It was a slope mine?
yeah, it was a shaft and a slope within the mine, going down this thing. I'm getting away from my story.
Go ahead.
After this episode at the Vulcan, the next day I hitchhiking from Lafayette to Denver. And who picks me up but John R. Lawson? So I don't,
He's the great leader of the Ludlow strike. You see biographies on him. But he's now the vice president of Rocky Mountain Fuel Company.
well, I doubt there'd be much left there.
By
he was-
1929.
Oh,
I mean,
yes,
yeah.
he
By the
was-
time he
he-
picked you up in
Oh,
that
sure,
car,
he's
he had
vice-
for a couple of years been vice
So,
president.
I don't think I was in his car 2 minutes, and we were, as soon as he knew who I was, and I knew who
He knew your
was.
family, and he knew everything, huh? About-
Well, he knew my activity well enough, and he had no doubt been given a story by Unwin. He started telling me, you're an anarchist, this and that. You got to be more considered, more reasoned. And I remember shooting back at him, what the hell reason is it that I named some of these fellows? that you push them back in an old pillar, you know, to grub out. All those things come.
You had words pretty fast. You were a 22, 23-year-old.
About that.
How old was
21.
he at that point in life?
I can't remember.
He
I
might have
would
been
say
a
he was
40, 50-year-old man.
50s or better. Well, anyway, that.
Did you get out of the car, or what happened to
No, he brought me in Denver. I don't think we
that?
parted.
You were still single, I assume,
Oh, sure.
but you were helping your family.
I was living with my family.
Is that the only time you personally you encountered Josephine Roche, picked up your speech when you made it during the Columbine strike in Denver?
At Grace Church.
At Grace Church. And this is the only time in your life you encountered John Lawson?
I would say yes.
But your mother, how about, what was her attitude towards him? Was she a
Well,
quiet admirer?
my
of
mother
his
knew him during knew of him, and I
during
don't know
the
what
wars down in,
during the 13th strike.
yeah.
She thought kind of very highly of him,
Mhm.
and he was looked upon as one of the martyrs.
He spent time
He was
in prison,
in,
didn't he?
I don't know where he went to jail, but he spent time in jail. And there were people like Charlie Shepard, who spent time in Canyon City.
In jail?
And,
Who was Charlie Shepard?
he was a local leader, Walsenburg, the 13th strike.
In the 13th strike.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that we didn't get was your reaction to, you commented, but we weren't on tape at the time, on the way you felt when I told you I was in Wales and England.
Yeah.
Your impressions, which I'd like you to tell, of the British labor movement and
Well,
British miners' movement, which is regarded highly sought in a way, but I'd like your analysis of them and what they're like.
It'd be very superficial. The miners that I met were typical of the English countryside. There were some of them extremely militant in their own way, but the militancy there, to me, didn't take on the character of what you'd find, say, in Pittsburgh or what.
What years did you know British miners?
31, 32, and you talked about Welsh miners.
Yeah.
Well, to me, in their own way, they're quite an outspoken crowd, but what I say, very idealistic. Comes down to it, they're conservative in the end result.
Okay.
You see.
We were off tape, but I'll better get your impressions if I differ with you and get you to comment, okay?
Good enough.
Aren't they in general, because of the difference in the history, more not only articulate, but isn't there a general higher level of intelligence?
Well, I would say intellectually, a knowledge of background, from where they come. They accept themselves as
They're born as miners and they stay as miners, and they improve themselves in a sense, don't they,
well,
many of them?
My father and my Uncle Dick, when you hear them telling about the age they went into the mines, pushing.
How old was your father when he went into the mines in Scotland?
I would say 10 or 11.
How about your Uncle Dick? Same?
About the same thing.
Was their father a miner?
He was shale miner.
Was their grandfather? I know, was this generations, or do you know?
I couldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't count for that.
Well, certainly in Wales, it's this type of thing, you know,
Yeah.
grandfather and even great-grandfather.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing, maybe that when I look upon it, the whole thing is there was nothing beyond being a miner. You know what I mean? Getting out of it or breaking the tradition of the family. That was.
Well, I don't know whether you're criticizing that or whether you're saying that they're just sort of. Yesterday you said something very interesting. I thought you said they're more British than they are like class conscious or anything. You used some such phrase.
Well, they have.
You compared them what to British?
They developed certain traits. I use the expression. A British soldier, he follows the command. He has one way of fighting, and you don't break him of that habit. I remember there at Aachen during the war, they stayed in, I forget how many months on one line, typical artillery duel and whatnot, and we went in there and had to break it in 2 or 3 days, and they'd been there all winter. But with them it's tradition. They're just so steeped in it, and this.
Well, let me ask. I think that's an interesting parallel that you gave that, to tradition, to these things. But there is something else about your position that I'd like to challenge a little bit. I think the American miners are molded on the violence rather than class consciousness or anything else. But the violence that's as American as cherry pie.
Yeah.
In other words, the violent way that the immigrants were treated, the violent lynchings, of the blacks and the racism, the violence with which collective bargaining or joining a union was treated. You were shot down with guns. The British never encountered violence as in other words, the British ruling class 100 years earlier, if they wanted to join a union, found a way to capture the union leadership or something, but accept it. Yeah, and I wonder if what you're describing as our militancy, I sometimes wonder if it isn't a style almost to respond to violence, a noisiness and a...
No, I don't.
That's why I wanted you to comment on
put
it.
This way, when you go into background, we're talking about coal. It is the land of the immigrant coming to this country.
Yeah.
He winds up in western Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania. My father come out here to the west, and you had a breed of mine owners. Well, take him Bashore's book. He describes the Denver bankers footing the bill for the National Guard. Their concept of mining coal was to keep these, whatever you want to call hunkies, in it's slave philosophy, chain gang philosophy. So the whole thing, if they couldn't be turned loose, put a barbed wire pen around the place, a few gunmen, and keep them docile. And with this kind of repression, you have the Molly Maguire was the first breakout of that thing. You had a few coming from Europe where acts of the anarchists was a popular thing. They brought that with them.
But leaving out the Molly Maguires,
yeah,
the basic founders of the UMW by 1890 were the more intelligent, English, Welsh.
They come out of the Western Federation of Miners.
Well, I didn't know that. I knew there was even Lewis himself spent some years in Western metal mines, and then came back.
Well, that part of his history.
Yeah, I knew he left, Illinois and went out there, and...
Where was it, Coeur d'Alene?
They listed in some of his biographies,
Yeah.
they don't get specific, but that he spoke of it,
Well...
and there was a molding that we don't have
Moyer
today.
and some of those old...
But what I'm saying is most of those miners that came out of that weaver tradition and all, it was an honorable tradition. It was this British tradition.
Well,
we're talking about.
take the history of mines in the, go up to Silverton, if they still preserve.
You're talking about Western Federation of Mines?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their headquarters, they had a library that you wouldn't find in a public library. Shakespeare, well, you mentioned.
Yeah, but I went through Wales, and that's exactly what's in
Well,
every Welsh town. Every Welsh town has a better union, miners' library, than
Yeah.
a public library.
Yeah, well, you found that with,
Yeah.
with the.
The
and-
Western Federation was in that sort of intelligent tradition. You didn't just learn the history of labor and Marxism. You learned poetry, you learned history, you learned.
Well, I think
know.
that was an integral part
Yeah.
of the Western Federation of miners.
Well, let me ask you, did you ever hear of Reverend Wahlberg? That name mean anything to you?
I know him very well.
I talked with him. He's
Yeah.
he's gone to Detroit,
Yes.
and I'll tell you, I didn't know him. I didn't know of his existence, but the Wayne State Library, which Walter Reuther's now, I think, the Walter
Yeah.
Reuther Labor Archives, while I was there, showed me a bunch of glass negatives of Ludlow, and they were a gift of E.M. Wahlberg.
Yeah.
I asked him how I could find him. They said he was a local man, so they looked up the gift letters and all, and I
Yeah.
called him. And he's still a minister there.
Oh.
Must be about 75 or 80
He
years
would
old.
Be that.
Vigorous,
He
intelligent, and he told me that John Lawson had made a gift of them to him. And he began to spell out, but I don't have my notes or remember,
Yeah.
that he had a continuing history of being a dissenter since he went to a Utah coal camp as a minister.
Yeah.
And the company brought in Japanese, several hundred Japanese
Yeah.
miners, to be miners, and, it opened
Yeah.
his eyes to the whole system.
Yeah.
Now, how did you know him? Because I never had heard of him until he told about himself.
Well, I came back to Colorado. I'd been away for a while in '36, and he was at Grace Church. In fact,
Same church, this
he,
liberal
he,
church? Okay.
he took over from Heist,
What was the first minister's name?
Reverend Heist,
H.
Heist, as I remember.
Heist had been there for many years, like in World War One or something?
Sure.
Okay.
And, well, he opened
What was the denomination? Was it an
it was
interdenominational?
Grace Methodist.
Grace Methodist. Okay.
He opened the doors, the unemployed movement.
Heist had, or?
Heist preceded that.
Yes, but when you met Wahlberg, he
Wahlberg.
did. You mean the Workers' Alliance or the unemployed
all
councils
of
could
those,
meet there?
They had access for meetings and whatnot. I don't know whether he was there prior to my going in the Army. I remember.
When did you go in the Army, Jim?
At the end of 1942.
How did you manage it? Weren't you over the age for getting
Well,
in?
I'm getting to that story. Ed Johnson was senator, and he was one of the speakers at Grace Church, and I was a candidate on the communist ticket.
You were in what year?
42. Maybe it was independent. I don't remember. Well, anyway, Ed Johnson and I had a good debate on opening the second front.
Yeah, those were famous debates.
Yeah.
Labor movement and others.
So 2 weeks after I had got my draft notice.
Even though you were age, whatever it
Well,
was, 36
hell,
or
I
something, you
was,
should have been left alone by then, huh?
You know,
Did you have a family at that point?
I was married.
Married.
I didn't have a family.
Where did you serve?
I tried to remember how old.
You mentioned Aachen. I didn't know because I was with the 102nd Infantry and we were below there.
Well, hell, I
but
was
we were in that same
79th
front.
Division.
Yeah, well, you were along the same 9th Army front, I believe.
Well, we were
when I
both,
got hurt and went back in the service, a lot of 79th Division people, I think, were in the same hospital.
Yeah. Well, that after that debate, I went in, get drafted, wound up in the infantry.
Yeah, I did too.
I
Were you
think,
drafted, Tim?
yeah.
He says he debated the senator and got drafted. What was it like to be say in 1942, was there looking back historically from a vantage of 30-some years now, was the communist platform that you ran on very different, looking coldly, at it, than a straight New Deal platform?
I wouldn't,
The platform, the public
yeah, I
platform.
think at that time,
Yeah.
there were very little difference.
You were calling for a Soviet-American alliance, a second
second
front,
front,
and
yeah.
many, this was acceptable to
Yeah.
people all up and down the line, wasn't it?
Of course, prior to that.
How many votes did you get, and what were you
I
running
don't
for,
recall.
senator?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
opposing candidate. I think it was an independent ticket at
Yeah.
that time. We had what was called the Progressive Federation.
No, I didn't know that.
That
In
was
1942?
That was some of the supporters were,
The progressive movement, you mean, in Colorado? You picked up that type of language?
they were hangovers from the La Follette days.
What was the name of the great, there was some famous figure out here. I can't think of him now.
I
There've been
don't
some
know, would
biographies.
be Bill Tanner.
No, give me another name and I might remember it, but I'm not.
Well,
I sort of a progressive figure. I can't think of him that became an editor of Labor. Keating.
Ed Keating.
Wasn't he a progressive from this state?
He was hangover. He was part of the Costigan movement.
Yeah, but these were things you knew about in the
Oh.
20s, or when did they take place? I don't even know.
Well, ask about the Greeks, where they went after 13 strike. They went into New Mexico, Arizona, Bisbee.
Many of them stayed around Colorado, too?
Yeah, little restaurants and what have you. I could go from Raton, New Mexico, to Gallup. I couldn't spend a nickel for a meal. A buck.
You mean between Raton and Gallup, you knew almost every Greek
Well,
restaurant? Huh?
when these Greeks, I went in there and they knew what my mission was, who I was. Not a dime.
What years was this, in the 30s or earlier?
36.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd never gotten over the
No, and
Their
you
history.
ask them where they come from.
Yeah.
Delawa,
Yeah.
Sopris.
Shut
The
your
CF&I
mouth,
camp.
I'm gonna look at the stuff. Now, damn it,
A dangerous place
They
to be talking about colonizing.
didn't get the.
I'll tell you who I asked you about, and I didn't repeat it. We didn't get it down. Did you tell me everything about Reverend Wahlberg? You said he functioned in the 30s with the progressives and
Yeah, up till the 40s.
till you left in the 40s. He
Yeah.
probably stayed on. You don't know when.
No,
he left Denver.
he was here for a while during the war, and I remember I come back out of the
When did
army.
you come back to Denver?
September 45.
Mhm.
He was gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you did not function after World War II as a part of the organized left political
No,
movement.
because
You were much more independent and functioning
well,
with
when
a
I come
friendly
out of the
basis.
army, I
Mhm.
had a family
Mhm.
approaching, had to get a house,
Mhm.
and I had to go to work. Simple.
Well, you've done real well. You adopted you told me the painting trade, and then
Yeah.
and now you actually make up the pigments or whatever you call it.
I put pigment together.
Okay.
Well,
The part I wanted to ask was Mike Lavoda. You had an opinion as to what his role might have been. I wish you'd express it.
Well, here's the thing. I never encountered, I might say, anything where I entertained or subscribed to the attitude of some that Mike Lavoda played both sides of the fence. He looked after Mike. He did have, in my way of thinking, a certain amount of consciousness about trade unionists. Didn't go beyond that. in the 27th strike. He did support the strike in the.
He did? And he was a UMW staff man?
Yeah, I don't know if he was on the
Yeah.
payroll or that.
Mike Lavalley?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember him? He's about in his 80s now. And
Well, he has to be, because he.
I think he, in an interview I had with him, either he or someone else mentioned an organizer named Jack Diamond, who some people thought was an agent, was a long-term UMW organizer. And I don't know whether he was just speculating wildly or, and I'm not sure it was him, one of them.
Yeah,
That was before, at Ludlow, you know, the
Yeah.
staff team.
I've heard that name, but I couldn't place it.
So, Mike,
Well, I'd say this, Mike, when the steel campaign started in Pueblo, he
Yeah.
was here for a while.
yeah,
And one of the Italian guys that come out of 13th Strike, Fantacchio,
Fantacchio,
Nick Fantacchio,
up here in Denver now?
I don't know. No, he lived in Colorado Springs. I think he was, Phil Murray sent him to Indiana. That's where he hung out. And I had contact with him when on the Pueblo situation. And Mike Lavoda and he had a background together. Not only
They knew each other at Ludlow and in the intervening years.
Yeah. They
What
were standbys.
What happened to you between the defeat at Columbine
Man.
and because the next time you picked up, you were doing other things. Did you leave the mines for a while before you came back to Vulcan and all that? Did you travel?
No, I didn't. That was a short span, the Vulcan.
Yeah. Well, what happened after Columbine? Did you get in the Save the Union movement, or what did you begin doing?
Yes.
Was that headquartered in Pittsburgh as well?
That summer 29, I put in that summer up in Wyoming and northern
Representing the
National Miners.
National Miners Union in the summer of 28?
29.
29.
Yeah.
Where were you in Wyoming? Rock Springs, or what types of places?
Rock Springs, Kimmer, Hannah.
Those are all still places that are, the underground is stripping now or something. Who were some of the other staff people that had mine backgrounds? Did you know Harry Sims, by the way, or was he just a young volunteer who got killed in Kentucky? Remember it?
I only knew of it. Yeah.
How about out here where you knew miners were there any other field people that?
No, I give you
the names of the ones.
Yeah.
Now there was another guy
They
you
come
mentioned.
from the east.
Yeah. You mentioned a guy, either Tom or Tim Snyder. Do you remember?
Bill Snyder.
Bill Snyder.
Yeah.
At Ludlow, he was a good organizer.
He was a top lieutenant.
And became a wobbly organizer, or what did you say afterwards?
No, he was not only sympathetic, he had joined them in Denver.
The Wobblies here?
Yeah, he had left the coal fields. And he left the Wobblies. He was active in the unemployed movement. He was a member of the party. And that is one thing I was going to promise to get for you.
Yes. What happened to him, or what you said?
He died, but his wife lives in California, near a sister-in-law I have out there. And she has the most beautiful collection of Ludlow.
I'd love to be in touch with her and see.
Well, I'm
You think there are photos and records, leaflets, or
I'm
what?
writing her a letter for permission to make copies.
Yes.
She won't give them
Yeah.
to me.
Right.
I kind of think
You were close to
close enough to
Bill
her.
Snyder. She was aware of that?
Oh, yes. She remembers that. I may be able, it never occurred to me to get them before
Yeah.
because things like that
Yeah.
have value, and hell, I
Yeah.
don't want them drifting around.
Mhm.
She's taking good
The
care.
yeah, she's saying, the problem is, you know, with a lot of this, is that, gee, sometimes you meet somebody who's had a barn full of wobbly stuff or
Yeah.
something they've kept all these years, and then it burns down when the barn goes.
Yeah.
This stuff really should be studied and then deposited in major universities. That's where a lot of the left collections are today, you know, and
Well,
after people, you know, have a chance to study them
I'll
and see what
have
they can make of
to,
them.
I'll write to Gaith and have her intercede.
Okay,
That's-
Gaitha was the...
Gaitha is your
Uh,
sister-in-law, or,
Spike's
Oh.
wife, divorced.
and they're
wife.
in California.
California.
You're in touch with Gaitha,
Yeah.
I guess. Well, there's some interesting people, and I think you helped with the Mike Labuda thing. What did you do? Did you do anything in 28 much, or did you work in the mines, or were you learning more about politics?
Some of the mine, I worked here in Denver. In fact, first job I picked up selling overhead doors. You know, the overhead.
The first overhead?
Hell, I put in some of the first ones here in Denver.
Those they were on tracks originally,
Yeah,
weren't they?
yeah. But that company went broke.
Oh, we're going to talk about what the mines were like as a physical place and the differences in some of them. Like how long it took to get from, say, where you picked up your lamp and your check and started to your workplace. How much did it name some of the jobs in the average kind of time? Or a mule skinner would, you'd have to be estimating it to some of the workplaces.
Yeah, well, you'd go to the process of going down 20, 30 minutes, you know, down the cage.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to the mule barn, harness your mule.
All that had to precede work time.
Yeah.
You did that on your own.
And then take the mule inside to where you were working. And then you started to pull coal. And
Mostly you were pulling, when you were a mule skinner, you were pulling 2 or 3 cars to a bottom dump, and they were being pulled up on a hoist for the most part, or what?
Motor,
All right.
yeah, would bring the cars into a party.
All right.
You'd pick them up from the party,
Take them.
take them in to the works or the
All right. What would the general distance be? Several hundred yards or more from the
500,
Okay.
800.
So you would bring, this would be a mainline motor, as we'd call it, except that was the only motor.
That would pick up
Yeah,
at the
right.
parting and take them out.
Yeah. How many would he pull out then?
Well,
Because you told me you were pulling some 13-ton motors earlier in your career.
yeah, well, there at Columbine, we'd take 26
And what size cars were you?
average, I'd say
2-ton, 4,000
2-ton,
pounds?
3,800
Yeah.
on them. And of course, in a hilly mine, the whole thing was handling the trip,
Yeah.
not popping the hitchings, keeping the cars.
Were you using sand for braking?
Oh, you always
always.
have sand.
All right.
That was one of my early skills, was how to maneuver down the hill and the curve,
Well,
and
how to
then
get away
run
from
with
it.
that trip,
Yeah.
you know. One time, the flag me to come out, and the other guy was coming in. And I remember that headlight, I knew he was coming. And all we could do was, I plugged the motor, and the nipper and I hit the crosscut at the same time. That damn thing just sheared those bolts off that Chevy motor, like coal went everywhere,
Yeah.
you know.
You were coming at each other, huh?
Yeah.
What did he do on his? Well, they hopped off too, huh?
As I remember, but of course
Everybody made it all right.
he was light and I was loaded.
Yeah, right.
So I had to trip me on it.
Hmm.
That was one of the close ones.
Yeah. What about awareness of dust? As you knew it then, not in retrospect today. How dusty were the mines you were in?
Well, Columbine was very dusty. In fact, it got so bad they forced rock dusting, lime dust.
They were already rock dusting back in the 20s.
Yeah, in that period, they never.
Was it a gassy mine to boot?
It was. We had electric lights, and they kept cleaning the haulage ways, the switches and whatnot, kept crews, because that stuff would accumulate, you know. But it was lignite. I don't think quite as bad as bituminous.
Columbine is a subbituminous.
Well, more lignite.
More lignite.
Yeah.
Is that true in that northern Colorado?
The whole northern
Yeah.
field.
What else about working conditions can you shed light on in terms of, there was undercutting at all these Rocky Mountain?
Yeah, but
Fuel places.
I described to you how at the Rocky Mountain Fuel crowd before that
Yeah,
strike,
you
it
did.
just plundered that thing.
Yeah.
And as a result, the bottom would heave. You'd go into a place you could walk in.
Well, but this should show up in an accident rate. Were men
Well,
lost? Were there roof falls, or was it just a threatening atmosphere?
Well,
Because
it was more than threatening. It was terribly hard on mules.
why? Tell me.
Well, they'd keep excavating, digging out between the ties so the mule could get in and out with the car. And, well, sometimes heave so much during a shift you couldn't get in or out of the place.
What was the problem of heaving? That the mule couldn't keep a footing in
No.
pulling the cars on the track, or what? Between the
They had
ties?
to dig these between the ties so deep so the
Yeah.
mule cracked his shins
Yeah.
on these ties. It was brutal. I remember when I went back to Columbine after, I think that was the second time I went to work there. I took a job driving mule. 3 hours of that's all I could take. And I remember old Whisker's boss says, "I thought you were a mule skinner." I said, "I drive mules, but that's cruelty to animals."
That's because it was really cutting their shins.
Yeah.
Well,
But there are other factors besides, when you talk about conditions, when they're pulling pillars, a mine that's supplied plenty of timber, and there's a science to mining and caving, and you can do that fairly well, skillfully, and eliminate danger. But a mine where bad management, lack of timber, and whatnot, like that thing at the Vulcanite, where they forced these men into a place, and a mule.
or you say pulling, they begin caving in almost before they've developed
Well,
parallels or
I've
anything.
had pull a car out and that damn thing come in back of you. Feel that
Yeah,
the
you
air of that thing pushing the car and you and the mule out of that damn
Close
place.
scrapes each time almost.
Well, mules got more sense than man.
Are
Yeah.
mules something like rats? Do you think all animals have an instinct?
Well,
about
hell, I've seen, the only way to get a mule into a place like that is back him in. You wouldn't drive him in.
He was too smart. He
Yeah.
was danger.
And you had to, when you drop that tail chain, you better make sure you hit the bumper to keep the front end of that car down, because he took that car and was gone, you know.
Is this instinct? Is this intelligent? You're not judging what you're dealing with there amongst animals. There's a sense of the heaving or the communication with nature almost.
They could tell.
How about rats? Did you have much experience with watching them in
Mice
those?
and that.
Yeah.
They'll leave it.
They leave these bad working places.
Oh,
You don't
sure.
see them there.
You could.
A man eating lunch in there is not going to have rats around him if it's bad top and bad bottom.
Well, the old timers could tell when you see the rats scurrying or the mice, and you could hear the roof creaking. It's time to look out and get out of there. If you can't timber it, get the hell out. You know, make sure your equipment, whatnot. And I've seen it just come in so quick, bury cars, tools and everything. Men, get out. Just to
Of course,
hit
these were the days when men furnished their own tools, except
Sure.
the heavy equipment
Yeah.
too.
shovels, drills.
Yeah. What was the pecking order occupationally? What were some of these operations in which the miner was like a master miner, the way in Alabama, whatever, I forget the nickname they had for him, and he actually paid off the hand loaders on the tonnage basis, or were these men each individually employed?
Well, most mines, two people as buddies would be assigned 2 rooms or a pillar. They'd drive one up ahead of the other, and when they were, the company would undercut.
They'd furnish on an hourly basis the undercutting and this kind of.
Well, a machine runner got
Yeah.
so much per place.
Okay.
The miners
They
They
drilled and blasted themselves.
drilled and
Okay.
blasted.
All right.
Next day they'd load it. They had to timber, do all of that themselves. Now at Columbine was a different system. They would put the machine man in there, cut it. Then the drillers would come in and drill it. Timbermen would come in and timber it, and they'd shoot it down. And
A
these,
little bit more like a factory system.
well, they loaded this 44 cents a ton.
That was the hand loading price.
Yeah, and the difference would from 44 to 76 cents a ton, 78
Yeah.
cents a
Did you ever
ton.
meet any John Henrys as hand loaders? The kind that
Oh,
sort of boasted dragged and
the only guys could make money at that sort of arrangement were brutes. They just get in there and heave to, so to say.
and then
but,
drink themselves to death maybe at night.
Well, it was hard life. It killed them all. And if they didn't have that strength, it was a hard go to make a day's pay under those conditions.
You meet some rather small-sized men who were hand loaders. I don't know whether they came from a long-lived breed of peasant stock in Europe or what,
Well, Italians were great.
Yeah.
I remember I pulled coal in the Puritan mine. There were three Italians, and they made me a deal to be their driver. Well, of course, when they were on contract, the whole thing was to get cars in and get them out.
Everything depended on the cars.
And that was an active thing. Hell, I've seen me go day after day, I wouldn't touch the shovel. Get the cars in, get them out. And then we had one day a week where, that day when the mine didn't work, we would work. We cut with, what a puncher is, an air. They'd cut, two of them would cut and drill and shoot. And the other guy and I would load whatever cars were allocated to us. And hell, I've seen us load 24 cars by 1 o'clock. I can no more think of that today than...
Did you see compressed air drills out here in that period, or were they never used? Or compressed motors too, compressed air motors. Did they ever use
gassy mines? They had them.
The big tanks, and they
Delau
bring them back each time. And
had that type motor, air motors.
which was the mine?
Delau.
Where that was
Southern.
CF&I and Southern.
Yeah.
That's where it was very gassy. They didn't risk putting an electric motor in.
Yeah, they either, like Morley was all mules. They couldn't,
It was again a gassy mine.
very gassy.
Now Jim, the U.S. Coal Commission, the one in 20 and the one in 23, I'm not saying which one, maybe both of them said it in different ways. They would be sort of presidential commissions which, with professional staffs, didn't do a bad job at saying how brutally, the mining camps were run. They'd have some things to say, and then on one hand, that they might condemn the union for violence equal to the company. Like this type of thing.
Impartial.
Yeah, that type of so-called impartiality. Now, they also said something else. They were out of other industries. Some of them were executives, and some were just public figures who knew about modern industry.
Yeah.
Their feeling was that the chaos of the coal industry wasn't just the overproduction, too many mines and too many men, for what the nation needed.
Yeah.
From about World War I until actually World War II.
Yeah.
It remained that way. It's getting 2 days work a week and all. But they also said that they never had seen scientific management in the mines. In other words, since transportation was the bottleneck, the inability to get cars to the men, and then outside, the same type of thing. Having gotten cars to the men inside, they sometimes lacked the railroad cars, to dump into. There were periodic shortages, at least, that had to be solved at some places. It varied geographically. And
I've seen we couldn't work because they weren't flat cars or hot.
But looking back at your experience ended in this period that they were describing, in a way, the central portion of it. What would you say now that you are, in business and you know what it is to have to, get out things and your mind sees it in a different way than just politically. What could intelligent management have done a better job, or is it just the nature of the smaller mines?
No, it was the mode of operation at that time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, find a vein of coal, you got to put down a shaft, a slope, then next thing is get a tipple. It was all contingent of how much money was back of the thing, and what I remember when CF&I took over Tioga, they'd only put in so much. They put an old electric hoist there because that's all that mine could produce. They didn't invest any more than the requirement, you see.
Yeah.
And new mine come in there up above, and it put in more modern technique, electric locomotives, coal cutting machines. It didn't
And
take
the first loading machines maybe will
Yeah.
beginning to come in, I don't know whether
and,
here.
it didn't take them long to strip that area. Oh, that's a hard thing to rationalize.
And then, of course, they didn't know their market. Today, we think of
Well-
them as a monopoly. They couldn't always sell the coal. They had sales forces, you know. Now, CF&I, the captives, were a little different.
Well, they knew they had so much for steel.
Yeah,
They didn't plan that.
but didn't they sell into the general market as well?
I'm
I
sure
think they did.
Yeah.
What happened to your northern coal? Where was it sold? Into the Denver house heating market or what?
A big part of it.
Railroads?
Public service,
Utility?
yeah, and sugar beet, all of slack.
Well, they
What?
use their tremendous, what, boilers or what do they fire?
Yeah, they bought slack screens, you know. And I think that was about the height of it.
Mhm.
Walsenburg had steel mill,
That was a metallurgical.
and
coal.
Pueblo. It was harder, and they had
Mhm.
coking coal down there,
Mhm.
come out of Trinidad area.
Mhm.
See.
And the coke ovens were down in the area too.
Oh,
weren't they?
sure.
I think I've seen pictures of that whole area full of coke ovens.
Yeah. I don't think they are now. but
No, but in the early
the,
years,
coke the CF&I uses, they make right there at Pueblo.
mhm,
Yeah, they've got the coke ovens.
yeah. You said you also were involved in the Union Drive at Pueblo in around 36 to 38?
The steel.
Yeah, that it was signing the people up, but not yet able to get
Yeah,
bargaining
yeah.
rights, huh?
Recruiting and
Yeah, laying a basis for.
getting support.
Were you having to be underground then, or were you pretty out in the open? In, CF&I?
It was semi-open. The role I played was not open because the big part was
Beer and
no, it was to help these fellows, people you knew, give them confidence.
All right,
Plan
did
strategy.
SWOC put in a staff right then, starting in
they-
37, 36?
They had one organizer.
Who was he, do you remember?
I can't remember his last name. Big Mike. He was a Slav who come out of Gary, Indiana.
They assigned only one organizer.
One.
And then the progressives and communists and social, whatever was around, pitched in and helped. Was
to
that
help,
the idea?
that's the way the thing got started. I don't know how much you know about the Committee of 10,
No, I don't know about the Committee of 10.
and you don't know the history of Steel
No.
Unit.
No, I don't.
Huh?
No, I don't know.
Well, had there been no Committee of 10,
What was the Committee of 10?
Phil Murray would have never got steel workers underway, you see. Old Jack Johnstone, Jim Egan, we all played a role with it. Committee of 10 was a committee of 10 well-known steel workers. And they come out with declaration. Wheeling is where that meeting was held.
Around what year?
This would be in 35. And they, they give the history. A lot of those people in 1919, whatnot. And Cole was taking the lead. The NRA, this thing of union, and they come out, and it was an appeal. If you want to change this condition, now is the time to do
All
it.
right, so the Committee of 10 actually issued its own leaflets
By
and appeals to
manifesto.
the workers.
Yeah, and that's what started.
Laid the basis for SWOC,
Oh, sure.
and so the CIO felt it could start a drive.
Well,
Did they get a response anywhere? Did the
Oh,
people
sure. Well,
come out to
sure.
meetings, or what form? Or
they were
underground?
group meetings here and
Yeah.
there.
It stayed semi-underground, is that right?
And until they come out in the open, that's when Phil Murray and his crowd come into
Mhm.
picture. And they booked then open meetings in McKeesport, down the valley.
And 35, apparently you were still around the Pittsburgh area.
Oh,
is that
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I come back here first year, 1936.
Well, Pittsburgh was in many ways in those years it was the industrial heartland, wasn't it, that whole area?
I would say yes.
Even more than Detroit or
Yeah.
anywhere.
Well,
things went.
steel was hard.
Yeah.
Wattle, he was electrical.
And enough coal was around and
Yeah.
everything else.
The boats move up and down the river.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going
Okay.
to take off. Me, that there was a 6-week period, touch and go, you know.
It was all in 35, after Lewis announced the formation of the CIO generally, though, huh? You think?
I can't. When did he declare this?
I'm trying to remember. Immediately after he hit Bill Hutchison, that must have been around September, something like that, November, October, something in that, he called the guys together. Now maybe he did it earlier. Maybe
Yeah.
he formed it in February, and the argument at the convention was that he shouldn't have done it, you know.
Yeah.
In 35, he brought together the Reed Robinson's predecessor, you remember, I forget his name,
I
and
don't know.
Hillman and Dubinsky, you know,
Yeah.
and that whole crew. And of course, Howard of Typographical was in it in those years.
Yeah.
But, you know, UAW and Steel were organized, they claimed, by the left people in the industry almost.
Well, they didn't make the union, but they were the driving force. And old Jack Johnstone had a very keen mind.
Now, I didn't know any of these people, so
How to
you're
put this
educating
thing-
me by telling me like their backgrounds. Well, he was a good organizer besides a good
Well,
man.
he had been through 1919 strike.
Yeah.
He was Communist Party
Mhm.
organizer for years.
And they simply backed these 10 rank and filers and get
Well,
them
they
going.
used to go from Pittsburgh down to Wheeling and up into Ohio.
Yeah.
You know, they met around the circuit till they got this manifesto whipped out.
Did they issue one manifesto or several issues?
I can't
or-
remember. I remember this first one.
It was a call to the men to
they come out
organize.
in the open and
Did they sign their names, the Committee of 10? Was that the idea? What made it a committee?
I don't recall.
Mhm.
Committee of 10 was
That's
known
great, yeah.
by. See,
Yeah.
and it was very effective. They laid the groundwork
Yeah.
for Phil Murray to come into existence. Lewis had to put somebody there,
Sure.
you know.